Hi guys, Jamie here from JB Mocean, and today I'm outside and I also happen to have a drone. And I also happen to have a giant castle here behind me, and that train just went by at the perfect time. So what we're going to be doing today is finding out how we can put some 3D animation into our drone footage. So let's get started on this, here we go.
Okay guys, so what we're going to be doing is starting this off in After Effects. We're just going to bring in the footage. I have it here. You guys can download this from the description below. Now I want to go and right click on Interpret Footage Main, and I'm just going to round this off to 30 frames a second, just to make it easier for us, because we can't really type in decimal values into the Cinema 4D frames per second in the options. So just click OK. And we can drag this down to this composition icon, and it'll create a new composition for us, and it will put in the footage that we have. So I'm only going to be rendering out about 900, I think it's 940 frames of this. Let me just double check that. Yeah, so 940 frames, and I suppose the only reason for that is because it's pretty long, and you know, it's going to take us a while to render this out. Even 940 frames is going to take a good while. So I'm going to go to frame 940, which is here, hit N on my keyboard to set the work end area, and then hit Control Shift and X to trim the comp to the work area. So this is what we have, and this is what we're going to be working with. So we need to render this out as an image sequence, because that's what Cinema 4D, once we're creating our dome light in Redshift, we're going to want to be able to see this in our background. So we just need to have this outputted as an image sequence. So let's go to Composition, Save Frame Out as, Add to Render Queue, I should say. Let's change this to be a PNG sequence, and then it's just a case of specifying where you want to save this out to. Now I've already done this, so once you guys have set your location, just click on the render button and that will render away. It'll probably take about 7 or 8 minutes to render out the image sequence. Once that's done, then you guys can continue along here. So what we're going to do next is we're going to track the camera. So let's go back to the composition that we just created, go to Animation and click on Track Camera. So that's going to start tracking the camera. It's going to give us a bunch of track points, and then we're going to be able to create our track solids wherever we need them, and it's going to give us our 3D track camera. So I'm just going to pause the video while that's doing its business, and we'll pop back in once that's done. Okay, so that's finished tracking the camera. So now we need to create a track solid. We need to create some solids, and we need to create the camera. So to do that, what we're going to do is we're going to hover over here until we get a nice flat looking target. We're going to right click and go to Create Solid and Camera. Now you can see we have our track solid here, and that's what we're going to be using to position our emitter, which is going to be emitting the spheres, and we also have our 3D tracker camera. What we can do is just kind of scale this down a little bit, and we can just rotate it so that it looks more like it's, you know, coming out of the, so that it's more square with the castle, I suppose. Something like that. And if we just scrub along here, we could even just push that over a little bit so it's more centered in the hole at the top of the castle. So kind of like that will do it. It doesn't have to be perfect, just something to allow us to align our emitter to. And we're going to do the same with the floor. So if I select my footage, go to the camera tracker here again, let's find a nice flat target, like something like here. And then we can right click. Actually, let's even see if we can find a better one than that. Something like this one. Right click and go to Create Solid. And we can scale this up just so It's nice and big. And now you can see that this is going to be tracked along with the floor. So that when we are going ahead and creating a floor, because we're going to need a floor to receive shadows, we know where the floor should be. Okay, so that's cool. Let's do a file save as, and I'm going to save this into a folder that I've already created. And now the next step isn't going to work, and that's because there's something wrong with the Cinema 4D exporter in the latest version of After Effects. See, I clicked on it there and nothing happened. So the solution for that is, well, what I did is I downloaded an older version of After Effects. This version is the most recent version, but the Mocean Cinema 4D exporter is not working in the new version of After Effects. So it's just a case of downloading the older version and then opening the project that we've just been working on, which is here. And you can see that this is it. Now we're going to be able to use the Mocean exporter. There you go, it works. Click OK. Let's select a location for that. And then save that out. Cool. So now let's jump into Cinema and we can open up the file that we just exported from After Effects. Here it is here. So you can see we have our 2 track solids, we have our 3D camera, and where are they? So there they are. There's the top of the castle, or it will be the top of the castle, and there's the floor. So I just want to kind of reorient this whole thing. I'm going to go into my right view, and I'm just going to grab this null, and I'm going to just start moving this around, just so I can line up the track solid that's going to be our floor more closely with the actual world. So I'm going to put that so it's on the floor. Now remember, I'm using this null to move everything around, so it's not going to affect anything. And we're going to get better orientation here once we jump back into the camera, go into my perspective view, jump back into the camera now, and now you can see that this looks a lot better. So we're looking down at the work plane, which is, for now, the floor. It's the only reference to a floor we have, and you can see that everything looks a bit more easier to follow. Cool. Okay, so now we're going to create a background material. We're going to create also a background object. And we're going to open up the material, call it background. We're going to be loading in our image sequence that we just rendered out from After Effects. We're going to be loading that into the luminance channel. So let's do that now. It's in footage, sequences, and this is the image sequence that we have rendered out. 940 frames. Click on any one of those, say no, open that up, go into the animation tab and hit calculate. That's going to calculate the amount of frames, and the frame rate is set to 30 frames per second as we already interpreted the footage in After Effects. So now if we apply that to our background object, we won't see any movement yet. We won't see the footage yet because we need to open the material, go into the viewport, turn on animate preview. Now you can see that we're able to play back our footage in our viewport. Cool. Okay. So what we're going to do now is go and create an emitter. So it's under here, under simulate, click on emitter, and we need to align this with this track solid. So an easy way to do that is make it a child of it. And then if I just go into this layout that I have here, so I've already docked this tool, the Reset Transform tool. If I click on that, now the emitter is aligned with its parent, which is the track solid. Now, if you guys probably don't, you might not have that docked up in your tools, hit Shift-C, just search Reset Transform. And I suggest just dragging that up and docking it up there so you'll have it for the next time we're going to use it. So now if we just scale up this emitter to be about the same size as the hole at the top of the castle. And if we just hit play, you'll see that particles are being emitted, or at least just these green lines. So obviously we're going the wrong way. So we need to rotate the emitter 180 degrees, hold down shift, and that will snap. It will rotate in increments of 5 degrees, bring that to 180. So now we can hit play on that, and you'll see that the particles are now going up in the right direction. If I just scrub forward a bit, just want to see, maybe we could do it moving the emitter over just a tad. Something like that. Cool. Okay, so now what we can do is get some spheres for the emitter to emit. Let's create a sphere. Let's bring the radius down to 15 centimeters. The segments we can also bring right down to 8. Let's make it a child of the emitter. I'm just going to do a file save. So it just says that the project was originally saved with an older version because we exported it out using After Effects, and that's what it does. So just say yes on that to proceed. So now if we hit play, we won't see anything. We need to go to our emitter. In the particle tab, turn on show objects. Now we're going to be able to see our spheres. So they're rendering out, and they're flying up, and they're going quite fast, which is fine. So we need to change a few of the properties here. You can see that the stop emission is set to 150 frames. So when it gets to 150, it stops emitting. Now we don't want it to stop emitting until the very end, you could say. So like frame 940. And now we're going to have spheres emitting for the whole shot. Also, lifetime, we need to bring that up as well. I think 850 would do it, because otherwise these spheres are going to start being killed off and they're just going to start disappearing as well. So we don't want that. We want to increase the scale over time so that they're going to get bigger as they're going up. So we can bring the end scale up to like 10, and we can increase the variation as well, so that they're not all going to be scaling in the exact same way. And we might even go more than that. We might even go 20 on the end scale. See what that looks like. What else do we need to do? We need to, well, we don't want them to intersect each other. So right now they're kind of small, but if they get really big, eventually they're going to meet each other on the way up, and they're going to intersect, and we don't want that. So we need to make the spheres dynamic. So right click in your sphere object and go to bullet tags and add a rigid body. Now if we hit play, you can see they're being shot up, but then gravity takes over and they're just falling to the ground. So we don't want them to do that. So hit Control D on your keyboard to bring up the project settings. Go to the bullet tab, and let's bring the gravity to like -10. So now you can see that they are flying up. And with regards to the speed at which they're being emitted, we want to reduce that to maybe like 500. Maybe even more. Or maybe reduce it even more. So down to 200 for the speed. Something like that is looking pretty good. Okay, so we have our bullet tag, which is making these dynamics. So now you'll see that they're not able to intersect. They're going to meet. They're going to meet, but they're not. If you're wondering what I did there, I deactivated the camera, but then I didn't know where my emitter was, so I just hit, with it selected, hit S on my keyboard, and then that brought me to it. So the spheres are going to meet, but they're not intersecting, which is the effect we're looking for. So as they're flying up, we can actually reduce the amount that's being emitted as well. We change the birth rate, editor, and renderer both to 6. And don't worry about the fact that they're not looking like spheres at the moment. We're going to fix that with the Redshift render tag in a minute. Okay, so that's looking pretty good. What we can do next is maybe just, if we just turn off the sphere for the time being, just so we can see our green lines. We don't need to do it like that. We can just say, don't show the objects. What we can do is in the emitter tab, we can increase the angle horizontal so that we get a bit more direction in these particles that are kind of flying off to the side and not all just straight up. Cool. Let's turn back on our spheres. And now you can see what that's doing for us. So we need to, right now, if we just turn this off, this track solid, you can see that our spheres are just going to appear right at the top of the castle. We don't want them to do that. We want them to appear from inside the castle. So we need to push our emitter down to about here. And now if we hit play, you'll see that we're not going to be able to see them be born. We're only going to be able to see them as they rise up through the castle. And you can see now we're having another issue in that some spheres are able to escape through the walls of the castle. So we're going to have to create some fake walls so that the spheres know that there are walls there and they can't just escape through them. They have to go up through the top. We're going to create a cube with a hole in the top of it and a hole in the bottom so that the spheres can escape out the top and out the bottom. And the only reason we want the hole in the bottom of the cube is so that we don't clog up the cube with like loads of spheres and they'll have nowhere to go. So let's just file save this and let's create a cube and let's align it to this track solid 1 using our reset transform tool, and we can bring that up again and we can scale this up. So if I just turn back on the track solid, just so we know exactly what we're doing, where the top of this castle is, go into my top view as well, hit S to just focus that in on the selected object, which is the cube. I just want to make sure that the emitter is not bigger than the cube. And I want to make sure that I move this around as well so it's more centered, so that the emitter is in the center of the cube. So I move my cube around. Cool. Okay, so that's looking pretty good. So now we can just make this a bit longer, bring it down so that it's just kind of underneath this track solid. We can turn off the track solid, make the cube editable by hitting C on your keyboard with it selected, hit C. Now we're going to be able to go into polygon mode and go and grab our direct selection tool, and then we can delete off the top, and we'll be able to delete off the bottom as well. So now we have no top, we have no bottom. And the last step right now, because we have our cube, but our spheres don't know that, you know, it's there. So we need to tell them it's there, and we need to tell them not to travel through it. So we need to add a collider tag. Under bullet tags, we need to add a collider tag to our cube. And now if we hit play, you'll see that the spheres are not going to be allowed to travel through the cube. Some of them seem to be escaping through the bottom, it looks like. Hang on, let's have a look and see what's going on there. Yeah, okay, so we just need to make this a bit longer, the cube that is. So let's go into point mode and let's grab our rectangle selection tool, and we can just click and drag to grab all those points and pull those down. The emitter as well is kind of outside the cube. So let's move the cube so that the emitter is just completely encapsulated by the cube. Make sure you're in object mode before you move it. And there we go. So let's have a look at that now and see if that's working for us. So now we don't have any spheres that are escaping through the walls of this. Some may eventually come out the bottom, but that's fine. We can mask those out in After Effects. So now we have our spheres, and they're all just kind of flying up, and they're gradually scaling up as they go. Okay, so these are rotating. We don't want them to rotate, so what we can do is go into our rigid body tag. Not that it will make a difference anyway, but I mean, the rotation is just kind of annoying me a bit. So I'm just going to go to, where is it? Angular damping under the force tab, and I'm just going to set this to 100%. Now we shouldn't be getting any rotation, and our spheres should just be traveling up through the cube that we created, which we can now make invisible because we don't want to see that. It will be there, it will be doing its job, but it's not going to be visible to us when we render this out. Now, of course, we're going to have to mask around the castle walls so that the spheres can't be seen from beneath those edges. So that's going to take quite a lot of pulling and poking of anchor points in After Effects, but we'll come to all that at the end as well. You'll also notice that we're getting a bit of clogging going on at the bottom, but I don't think that's going to be much of an issue. What we're going to be able to do is just render out the top region of the screen, so we won't be wasting time rendering these out. When it comes to render, we'll be able to save a bit of render time, and we're not rendering out spheres that we don't even need to see. Okay. So I think what we can do is we can add a couple more spheres to our emitter, because I want to have like a few different colors. I don't want them all to be the same color. So I'm going to grab this sphere, hold down Control, click and drag to duplicate it. Just make sure it's put under the emitter. So now we'll just call this one sphere.2. So now we have all our spheres, and if we just have a play on this from beginning to end, just to make sure that everything's working as it should be and we have no issues. Okay, I want to add a bit of variation to the scaling of these as well, because they're all kind of scaling up to be more or less the same size. So I'm going to go to the emitter, and I'm going to add a bit more variation on this. And I might just reduce this down a bit to like maybe 16. The end scale, that is. So how big they're going to be once they reach the end of their cycle. So they're going to come out, and they're going to be a lot more, there's going to be a lot more variation in the scale of them, and they're not going to be as big as they're coming out as well. So there's less clogging going on down here as well, which I think it's actually working out nicely for us, because, you know, we don't want a bunch of spheres down there for no reason. Maybe we could go into Control D and maybe bring this gravity to -20. So the gravity is going to be pulling them a bit more, but in the upwards direction. And let's just see what that looks like. I might just increase the amount just a little bit, because we do have a lot of gaps. We don't really have too many gaps once it gets going. I think it's fine. Maybe I'll just add, like, if I just select all, or click on my emitter, and in the birth rate editor, I'll just bring this up to 8 and 8. And let's see, we can add some speed variation as well. We'll add 100, maybe a little bit of speed variation as well. Lifetime is fine. We already did that. Okay. So now we'll have a bit of speed variation as well, so they're not all going to be traveling as uniformly as they were previous. I think I want them to be a little bit bigger, so end scale I'm going to go up to 18. See how that looks. Once we're happy with this, then we're going to be able to bake the dynamics, so that we'll be able to kind of quickly just skip ahead 2 frames. I'll show you what I mean in a minute. But yeah, I think I'm happy with that. Okay, so let's see. yeah, so what we can do now is we can bake the dynamics. So select all of the bullet tags, click on, because, well, before I do that, why am I doing that? The reason I'm doing that is because if I scrub along here, you'll see what happens. I can't really scrub because this is a dynamic simulation, and, you know, it's just making us having to play and wait and watch until we get to a frame we want to check out. And it's just not very efficient. So what we can do is select all the bullet tags. I'll do a Control S to save first. Select all the bullet tags, go to cache and click on bake all. That's going to bake each of those tags, and then we'll be able to scrub back and forth along the timeline without having to wait for each of these spheres to be born. Cool. Okay, so now if I just scrub along, you'll see that I'm able to scrub, and I'm able to go back, forwards, and backwards. I do find that if I scrub like halfway and then go back, I kind of get some weird issues, like stuff happening that shouldn't. But it's a safe bet if you just kind of scrub from the beginning all the way to the end. That's an accurate simulation of what you're going to be getting in your render. Okay, so now we have all of our spheres set up, our emitters set up and everything the way we want it. We can do a Control S, and at this stage now we can jump into our Redshift setup. So just go in, I have a layout here set up for Redshift. If you guys don't have this, and you might also be missing your Redshift options, what you can do is go to File, or go to Edit, Preferences, and you can go to your render preferences here. You can just turn back on the Redshift main menu, and it should pop back up. And it didn't there, did it? Hang on, let's try that again. Where is it? Redshift main menu. Okay, I don't know why it's not there. But anyway, I'm sure you guys have a setup for rendering with Redshift already. Okay, so if I hit play, you can see that we're not going to be seeing anything really. There's nothing to see in our anyway. We just get something there. There we go. Okay, so let's just bring this forwards. And now what we're seeing is our spheres, and we're seeing our background object. So we don't want to see that anymore. But what we do want to see is we want to see the exact same background, but this time using the Redshift setup. So let's create a dome light. We need to go into our render settings, set this to Redshift, and we're going to create a dome light. So here we can grab one here, and now if we hit play, you're going to see we're getting some nice Redshift shading. Right now our spheres are not looking like spheres, so we can fix that by selecting all of them, right-clicking, go into Render Tags, Redshift Object Tag, and let's go into the Geometry tab, override that, and turn on Tessellation. So now we're getting some nice smooth spheres, some nice spherical spheres. Okay, cool. So now we're going to create a dome light. Oh, we already had one. And we're going to go and add a HDRI. So I have a bunch of HDRIs that I downloaded from this website here, polyhaven.com. Loads of free HDRIs up there. You guys are welcome to use the one exactly that I've decided to use, or you can find your own one or whatever. But if you want to use this exact one, it is called this, and I'm not even going to try and read that. So that's what you're looking for if you want this exact one. So let's load that in, say no on that. And now we have our we have a bit of shadows going on, we have our lighting and all that good stuff. So we want to load in our backplate, which is basically the background, what we had set up in the standard Cinema 4D setup. Now we're going to be doing it the same for Redshift. So turn on backplate. We're going to load in the Cinema 4D. We're going to load in the image sequence that we already rendered out of After Effects. So it's in footage sequences, and if I click on any one of these and say no to that, now we can see our backplate, and we have to also unravel this, go to animation and set this to simple and detect the frames. So we have 940 frames. So now if we hit play, we will see that our camera is going to be moving along. Let's stop this for a second, and let's set just click on this little drop down here and set this to fit window. Cool. So now let's add some color to our spheres. So I'm going to create a new material, just stop rendering, create a new material, and I'm going to make this whitish. And I'm going to apply it to my spheres, one of my spheres anyway. So if we just go original size, zoom in, and let's just render this and see what it's looking like. Okay, so we have some white spheres in there. I also want to open this up, and I have some smudges that I want to apply. So I have this in my textures folder. I can include this texture in the description below. So it's just like some fingerprints, just so we don't get some really perfect reflections. We get a few smudges, a few imperfections. So I'm just dragging that into my node editor. I'll put this up to the description below so you guys can download it. I'm going to plug that into the roughness channel of my RS material. So we're going to get some smudges wherever the light is kind of shining on the spheres. You see a bit of smudges. Also, I'm going to duplicate this, and I'm going to make it, just a different color. Maybe like a pinkish, purplish kind of a color. And apply that to sphere.1. And then I'm going to duplicate this again and change the color to like a gray. I'm not being very adventurous here with the colors, but you guys are welcome to choose whatever colors you like, of course. And now let's play that and see what it's looking like. Okay, so that's not looking too badly. The next thing we can do is we can create a floor. So if we go back to fit window, and if we just kind of like scrub along here, around about this point, we're going to want to see some shadows being cast. So we're going to want to see some shadows that are going to be coming out of the castle shadow here. So we can just stop rendering. Let's create we don't have to create a floor. We could just use this track solid. So if we just duplicate this, bring it up to the top, we can turn this one off, and we can call this floor. Let's bring down the segments down to 1 and 1, because we don't need segments. And we can just scale this up. And we can remove this material. Now if we hit play, we are not seeing shadows yet. Let's just rotate this dome light and see. There we go. So now we have shadows. So let's make the floor invisible so that we can see our background again, but at the same time see our shadows. And to do that, we're going to right click, go to render tags, add a Redshift object tag, go into the matte tab and turn on override, turn on general, or turn on enabled, and shadows enabled. So now you can see our shadows just popped up there. And we need to rotate this dome light so that our shadows are going to be, looking like they're actually coming out of the castle there. Something like this. So let's just have a look at this now and see what it's looking like. If I just scrub along, hit play there. Shadows are coming out there, that's good. And keep going and try it here and see what it looks like. More shadows. We might need to rotate this a little bit. Ever so slightly, kind of that way. And okay, cool. So that's our floor set up. We have our shadows. So what we're going to do now is we're going to see how long this is going to take to render per frame. So do a Control S to save that. And let's just scrub along here until we find a good position with a load of spheres, because we want a load of spheres in there, because that's what we're testing. How long it's going to take to render this out when we have like a good chunk of spheres in there, because obviously when we render it and there's no spheres, it's not going to take very long to render. So let's go into our render settings and let's go to turn off save, and we're going to just render out the current frame just as a test. Stop this Redshift render view here, and we'll just render to picture viewer, making sure that Redshift is selected as the render. Just going to pause the video here now, guys, and then we'll see how long this takes, and we'll see about how we can go about bringing down those render times. Okay, so I just spotted that I accidentally left on the background. We don't want to do that, so let's just stop that. And hopefully now it's okay. There we go. And we go into the dome light, go to object, and turn off the background. Let's make sure that we're still able to see our shadows. So to fix, we're not able to see our shadows. If we go to alpha, we're not seeing our shadows because we need to go into our floor, into the Redshift render tag, and turn on effects alpha. Now we're able to see the shadows in the alpha, so we know we're good to go. Switch that back to RGB. And now we can do our test render now again, just to see how long this is going to take. We'll pause the video and we'll come back in a second. Okay guys, so that's finished rendering out that one frame, and you can see that the render time is huge. So let's see, hopefully we're going to be able to bring that down. So I'm going to turn back on this progressive rendering here in the render view, and I'm going to zoom into the original size 100%. And let's just get a render region here. Hold down Shift, click and drag to get a little region there. And we can turn on bucket rendering as well. So what we need to do is, we'll just stop this for a second actually. We need to add some AOVs so we can see what things we're going to be able to bring down, you know, in the render settings. So go into your render settings, go into your Redshift here, click on Advanced, and let's go to the AOV Manager, which is here under AOVs, Show AOV Manager. So what we're going to be working with is Global Illumination, Reflections, and Shadows, because that's pretty much all we have in this scene. So once we have that done, you're going to be able to see each of those in the, well, you should be able to see them. Hang on. So AOV Manager. Yeah, okay. So now you're going to be able to see them. What in the world is going on? Hang on, let's hit play. There we go. Okay, so I just had to hit play. And now if I switch to GI, which is Global Illumination, now we're going to be able to see that we have access to each of these passes. So we're going to work on GI first. So I'm going to go back into my render settings, and I'm going to go into Redshift. You can see that this is taking, well, we already know it takes a long time to render one frame, even just a small chunk. So we're going to go to sampling, and we're going to turn off automatic sampling. Now that's going to render a whole lot faster, as you just saw there. If I turn that back on, automatic sampling, you'll see that it takes a good while to even start working. Still going, it's still going, it's still going. And then it's done. But if we turn that off, you'll see how quickly it renders. Boom, it's done. Now obviously it shows in the render quality. So for what we're looking at, which is the global illumination, we can go into our global illumination tab under Redshift in the render settings, And we can bring this up. Say if we just multiply this by 4. Let's see what that does. So you can see that reduces some noise. Let's multiply it by 4 again. And we're getting rid of even more noise. And maybe we could just multiply this by 2 finally. And that's kind of smoothing it all out. I might go one more, multiply it by 2. And I'm just keeping a close eye on it myself, just to see, is it making much difference? Now that difference wasn't really worth multiplying it by 2 again, so I'm undoing that last one. And I think I'm going to leave it like that. Now, that is global illumination sorted out. Reflections now is next. So if I just increase this a bit. So our reflections are quite noisy, you could say. So what we can do is go into our dome light, and go to the details tab, and let's increase the samples here. So, sorry about that. So we're going to increase the samples here. Let's multiply this by 4 and see what that does for our reflection. Okay, so that didn't do anything. It's probably because I shouldn't be messing with the samples in the dome light for reflections. It's more for shadows. So let's jump into shadows. So you can see we have our shadows that are being cast on our spheres. We also have shadows over here on our floor. So now we'll increase this. Let's multiply this by 4. Our dome light samples. And now that should clear up some of that noise. It's not again. Okay. So what I should be doing is, well, I should know what I'm doing first of all, but now that I've had to think about it, okay, what we need to be doing is we need to go into sampling tab in the render settings, and I'm just going to make this a bit smaller, and we need to go into our, let's switch this back to reflections, and then we can select reflections, tell Redshift that we're going to be increasing the samples for reflections. Let's multiply this by 4. And that is going to remove some of that noise. So we can see that some of that noise is gone. We'll multiply that by 2. See if that does anything for us. Okay, so that's looking a bit better. And now for shadows, I think it might be light, possibly. I would have hoped that there's a shadow override, but we'll just see if light does it. We'll multiply this by something ridiculous, just to see if we're in the right place. So we're still getting noise, so I don't think we are in the right... Oh, wait, I set that to 0, did I? I did. Let's multiply this by 4. So that seems to be tidying up some of that noise there. So we're going to multiply this by 4 again. Might even multiply it by 8. Looks like we need a lot here. Yeah, we're going to multiply it by 8 again. So it's definitely increasing render times, of course, but it is getting rid of a lot of that noise for us. Might just multiply this by 2 and see if that makes much of a difference. Yeah, so that obviously is making a difference, but is it enough of a difference to justify bringing up the samples by that much? I think it is, you know, because it is very noisy. So I'm going to multiply this by 2 again. So we're going to have this amount of samples in our lighting. So now if we go back to beauty, Let's see. So that's looking pretty good. Okay, so if we just stop this, I'll turn off bucket render, turn off this region, and stop this from rendering in the render view. And now if we do, we'll just do a file save, and we'll do another render to picture viewer. So this is going to be the second test. So this is the first one. It took this amount of time for us to render it, which is really high, and to render out 940 frames of this would take ages. So I'm going to pause the video here, and hopefully when we come back we're going to have much shorter render times. Okay guys, so you can see that we've taken a good chunk of time off this render. So I think that this is good to go now. So we can just set this up for a full render. So we have our shadows in the alpha channel and everything's good to go. So let's just go back to frame 0, stop rendering this, and let's go to output. It's going to be 1920 by 1080. I'm going to be rendering all frames. I'm going to save it as a PNG sequence. We're not having any multipass images, so we'll save this to a folder called sequences, and we'll call this sequence, Abbey drone sequence. Okay, cool. Alpha channel should be turned on. And that's pretty much it, guys. So do a file, save, and we'll go to render queue. Let's add this to the render queue. And let that render away. So that's going to take, I'm not quite sure how it's going to take. I don't know if any of you guys have the same issue as me, but whenever I render stuff in the render queue using Redshift, I never get an estimated time, which is kind of annoying, but I don't know, maybe it's something I'm doing wrong. If anybody knows, let me know in the comments below how I can get an estimation of time for my Redshift renders. But after this is rendered, we're going to be hopping into After Effects. I might even break this into a part 2 video, I'm not sure. Just have 2 separate videos, because I know some of you guys are just here for the Cinema 4D stuff. But what I might do is break it up into a part 2 where I'm going to be bringing this render into After Effects, into this shot, and we're going to be placing it on top here on a top layer, and we're going to be masking around it, making sure that these edges cover up any spheres that are below it. And we also need to do some kind of masking as well with the shadow, so that we mask any shadow that appears below this line here. Okay guys, so that finished rendering, and it took 12 hours, so quite a chunk of time, but not too bad, I suppose. What I'm going to do is I'm going to put the fully rendered sequence in the description below. You guys can download it if you don't want to wait around for your render to finish, so you can continue on with the rest of the tutorial. So now that's rendered, we can jump back into our After Effects project, and let's just double click here and bring in our sequence. Make sure PNG sequence is ticked. Let's bring that in. Let's drag it down. So let's get rid of these track solids as well. So now this is what we have, and it looks pretty cool. So all we have to do now is make it seem as if it is actually coming from the castle, because we have to get rid of these balls. We're going to be using masks to do this. Now I did try and use the rotor brush tool to kind of rotor brush around the castle, but because there's so many, like, you know, dips and cracks and it's turning and there's a lot going on with the background and everything, rotor brush just wasn't doing a great job. So we are going to have to mask this by hand. So it's going to take a bit of time, but I suppose you could do it quickly as well if you wanted to. You could like kind of rush it and not get the best result, but at the same time, you know, who's going to be looking down here and focusing in on the edges here if they're watching this video? So it just depends on how much time you want to put into this and how much attention to detail you want to, we're going to use for this to make it look as genuine as possible. So what I do want to do first is I want to... no, I won't do that first. Let's just start masking this out at the moment now. Okay. Now the tutorial begins, finally. How many minutes are we into this? Okay, so let's grab our pen tool and let's zoom in. And we are going to grab our pen tool again. And now we can just scrub back to just about here, just before the spheres are visible. And then we can make a kind of a shape around the... Now don't worry about these pointy bits and these dips. We're going to come back to those later. We're just going to focus on the main shape, this kind of square shape, first of all. Something like that. And then we just need to leave space for the spheres to fly up out of the shot. So we're just going to go like this. Okay, so that's our mask. It's very difficult to see because it's dark green. So let's change the color of this, brighten it up a bit. And there we go. Now we can see it nice and clearly. Okay, so we're going to make a keyframe right here. Mask path, just unravel that, make a keyframe. Let's zoom in a bit. And I'm using spacebar, by the way, to get my hand tool. And I'm using the Z shortcut to, zoom in, hold down Alt to zoom out. Okay, so we have our first keyframe. Now we're going to scrub forward a bit. You can see that that mask is cutting away our spheres. And then we need to hit V on our keyboard so we can get our selection tool. And let's just lasso this anchor point and this one and this one. And now let's check that. So even in the middle, we need to refine that. And again, this all depends on how much time you guys are willing to spend on this. So if we just play that now, you can see that that is looking pretty okay. Just scrub forward a bit more and let's do that again. Now you can see my keyframes are being added automatically every time I make a change to the path here. And now we go back and see if it needs to be refined. So if we go into like the middle of these two keyframes, we need to refine it again. And even here we need to refine it again. Okay. So now let's have a look at that. Cool. So that's what you have to do for the whole sequence. You have to do that for the whole sequence. So I'm just going to do that now. I'm not going to say anything, and I might just fast forward this bit as well. And we'll see how we can get on. Oh, there's me, look. There's me down there. Okay, so I'm going to do this. I'll probably fast forward it. This is the way you do it, guys. Just keep scrubbing. Make sure your mask path is selected and just refine the path so that it's in line with the building. And then you can even scrub back and check if it needs to be refined further between each keyframes you set. Okay, guys, so happy masking, and I'll see you at the end of this. So guys, just so you know, you might have to put in some extra anchor points here. So what you can do is hold down the click on your pen tool, and we can use the add vertex tool. Then we'll be able to add in another point here, and we'll also be able to now animate that, just so we can get this rocking. Okay, back to fast forwarding again. So you'll see, guys, that I'm masking out this shadow, right? Don't worry about that. We're going to fix the whole shadow issue. You can see there that I haven't actually kept my shadow in the mask. So don't worry too much about that. We are going to fix that in a minute. So just keep going with masking your spheres for now. Okay, so I have my spheres masked now. So if we just watch that and see what it looks like. So from far away, it looks pretty decent. You can't really tell. Oh, you can see a bit of, darkness here, I suppose. But yeah, so far so good. You can see that the shadow is completely gone. So we're going to fix that now in a minute. Cool. Okay, so now let's fix the shadows. So what we're going to do for the shadows is we're going to create another layer, basically. So this is going to be the main sequence. We're going to drag this down again, and this is going to be the shadows. So if we just hit enter on that and call it shadows. And we need to mask the shadows now. So see the way you can see there's shadows going beneath the castle. So we don't want to see that. So we just mask that out. And we're going to run into something. I'll show you what that something is in a minute. So let's just start masking this shadow now. So let's grab our pen tool again and make sure this one's selected. And we're going to start masking around this. So I'm going to cut it off just slightly under the top of the castle because I want to feather this so it'll be a nice smooth transition. And we're also now, because we're masking the shadows separately, we're going to have control over the mask opacity as well. So that's going to be handy. So I'll show you what I mean. You can see our shadows now beneath this line have disappeared. And we're also going to be able to control the opacity of these shadows now. We just unravel all this. We can control that. So now we can get it exactly to the same opacity as the castle, or close enough. And I'm also going to feather this as well. So you'll see that this gradually kind of fades and there'll be a much smoother. Do a Control S to save. There'll be a much smoother transition as well. If I just, feather that to get a nice smooth transition like that. So if I zoom in, that's before, that's after. So that's nice and smooth and good to go. So now we can start animating this mask. So let's just go back to where our shadow is out of the shot to about here. We're going to want to create a mask path keyframe here. And let's start animating this mask. So you can see the issue we're having now, right? Because we're masking the shadow, and now that both of our masks, if I just click on this one, so this mask now is now starting to intersect with this mask, and now you can see we're getting double the shadow. We're getting that overlay. See that? We're getting double the shadow because we're also getting this layer's shadow, and we're getting the shadow from the shadows layer. So we're going to have to come up with a way to fix that. Now, we could have probably just rendered out the spheres separately from the shadows. We wouldn't have had this problem. But a fix for this is going to be, what we can do is just before these guys intersect, and we can actually make them intersect a lot later than that. And I'll show you what I mean. If we just grab our mask path, and on this keyframe, we can bring this right back so that it's not yet intersecting. And grab this one. So it's still intersecting, obviously, but we need to grab this one so that this one also isn't intersecting. So you can see what we're doing there, before, after. So now those masks are no longer overlapping, so we're not getting that double shadow. Let's just make sure that that continues on. We need to refine that. So about here, we can bring that closer again to our spheres so that we can try and avoid that overlap for as late as possible. I'm going to use K to go to the next keyframe, J to go to the previous, K to go to the next, J to go back, and then we can tighten that up. J to go back again, K, I'm just flicking between keyframes with J and K here. So this is the point at which we can't really avoid intersections of these masks after this point. So now is the time we're going to do our little trick. We're going to grab another one of these, and this is going to be our roto brush layer. And we're just going to roto brush this so that we can only see this in the layer, and then we're going to be able to keep this at the top so it's going to cover over any, messiness that we're getting. So let's do a Control S first of all, and we can trim this layer. So hold down Alt and use the left square bracket on your keyboard to trim that to the point at which we need it, and then we can scrub forward and we can do about, we'll say here, and then you can use Alt and your right square bracket to trim it again. Now this is the only part of this we're going to need to roto brush, just a little part here. Let's double click on that. Let's go into our roto brush tool and let's just try and select this. So I'm just going to click and drag, and hopefully After Effects will do its business and do a good job of selecting that. So it's done a great job of it already. I could just kind of hold down Alt to get rid of that little gap there. And you don't need to worry too much about the gaps anyway. Nobody's going to notice those gaps. And anyway, the background is going to be dark anyway, so it's going to work out nicely. And then all you have to do is, oh, there's a straggler here. Hang on, let's get that straggler. And we don't need to worry about these guys in the bottom. We're just concerned with kind of the top area that's going to be covering the shadow. It's going to be hiding that messiness that we're having with the shadow. Now let's hit spacebar to play, and that's going to analyze this, and you can see that it's following along all the spheres. And it's done. Okay, so that was quick. We can see what this looks like if we click on this little icon here, toggle the alpha overlay. Cool, so that looks pretty good. And if I just pause this now and click on freeze, that's going to freeze all the frames so that this is going to be good to go. We're going to be able to use it, and if we won't be able to make any further changes to the roto brush after you freeze it, but we don't need to, so that's fine. Cool, so that's done now. If we go back into our composition, you can see that we have this layer all by itself with no shadows or anything that we're going to be able to put on top of here. So right here, just before this layer kicks in, what we can do is we can select our main layer. So this is our main layer. So if I hide that, nothing happens because this is here now. So we select our main layer and we can hide. See, what we're trying to do, remember, is prevent this overlap of masks that's given us this double shadow effect. So the minute this layer comes into play, we can select our main layer, grab our mask, and then we can just make sure we're on a keyframe here. Use J and K to flick between keyframes. So we're on the keyframe. We can just, now you have to make sure that you're in the right position. Yeah, okay, so now's the time to do it because the next frame is going to be, we're going to be covered with this rotor brush layer. So just go back to where we were. And then we can, any second now, select the mask path, go to the next layer. Now I did that using Control and my arrow keys. You can skip, you can flick to the next layer. Hold down Control, left arrow key. Hold down Control, right arrow key. That's how you go to the next frame. Then we're going to drag. Oh, what are we doing? Hang on. I have my rotor brush tool selected. Then we're going to, again, select this mask path. We're going to drag this down so that we can't see the shadow anymore. All we can see are the spheres. So you can see it's going to go boom, like that. Now what we're seeing is, we're not seeing, if I turn off my rotor brush, this is what we're seeing. But because we just created this rotor brush layer, this is what we get. So now if we scrub forward, now our mask is going to come back up because we have this keyframe telling it to. So use K to jump to the next keyframe, grab your mask path and just do the same again. Drag that down. And we're going to do the same again. We're going to do it for each of these keyframes. I'm going to drag that down, all of these. We don't even need to do it there because we can't see the shadow anyway, but we'll do it anyway. K again to go to the next keyframe of this layer. I'm going to drag that down again. Now, where's our shadow gone? Oh yeah, we have to animate this shadow mask further over the way, so we'll do that now. That's why we can't see our shadow anymore. But we can continue on what we're doing with this layer so we don't get confused. So we go to that keyframe, then we go to the next keyframe, or not even the next keyframe. Where our rotor brush layer ends, which is right here, we can drag it down for the last time. Okay. Make sure there's no shadow there visible as well. We could even do a bit of a better job with the shadow there as well. And then the mask is when the rotor brush layer comes to an end, just before it comes to an end, we're going to jump this back up again to where it was. So grab all these keyframes, I think it was these ones, and we're just going to jump that back up again. So that if we skip now, hold down Control, go back one frame, go forward one frame using your arrow keys while holding down Control, you can see that that is spot on. Just after our rotor brush layer ends, this one kicks back in. And now we need to finish off animating our shadow mask. So right about here, we can continue on with this shadow path or shadow mask animation. So we're just going to drag this over. Cool. Okay. Perfect. So that's our shadow and everything done, masked and everything. So now if we just have a look at this and see how it's looking. So that's looking pretty good with the mask down here. We still have to mask out these little grooves here as well, so that we're going to be able to see the sphere. So watch the shadow now. Watch the shadow part. we should be getting no issues. Oh, we're getting a bit of an issue here. What's that being caused by? So what's causing that issue, that little jump there? You can see our spheres come back in. That must be our rotor brush. So we may have to mask the rotor brush as well. Yeah, we'll have to mask this rotor brush layer as well. It's getting a bit annoying now having to do that, but it's only a little bit. It's only a little chunk here, so we'll do that now. We could even probably just copy the... Yeah, you know, we could copy the mask from the main sequence. We can copy this mask, Control C, bring it up to our rotor brush, and then do a Control V on that. Then if we hit U with this layer selected to show our keyframes... No, that didn't work, did it? Hang on, let's try and let's delete all these keyframes. Let's see if we can just, with the mask now copied, if we select the keyframes that we need, so it'd just be these ones. Control C and then Control V. No, that's not working for some reason. Okay, we're going to have to do it. Hang on, let's delete this. See. Did that do it? No, it didn't. Okay, we're just going to have to do it the hard way, I'm afraid. So let's, just where this rotor brush layer kicks in, which is right here, we're going to create a mask. Pen tool, and let's zoom in, and let's just back to our pen tool, and let's just get this done. G as well as the shortcut to go back to your pen tool. Now, okay. What is... Do you know what, actually? I think I might have just... Hang on. Let's turn this off. Why is it not letting me mask the rotor brush then? Huh, that's strange. Won't let me mask the rotor brush. Why is that? Let's see. Let's delete this mask and let's put this, let's pre-compose this and just call it rotor brush comp. That's fine. Now let's see if it will let me mask it. Probably doing something silly here, am I? Let's see. Pen tool again, and now let's try that again. Boom, boom. Boom, 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 boom. What in the world is going on? Why won't that mask for me? That is so strange. Do we need to go into the... So let's undo all that. I don't know why it won't let me mask a rotor brush layer. That is just the strangest thing in the world. Can we mask it in the, if we go into it, I doubt we can mask it actually in the... Oh, we can. Okay, so we just have to go back into the actual rotor brush layer by... It's a bit annoying that we have to do that because we're not really going to be able to see the castle. So let's see if we can... Now, sorry guys, because I know this is a pain. I didn't actually think that I wouldn't be able to mask a rotor brush layer from within the composition that I'm working in. So if we just see if we can... We may be able now to just copy this mask and then go in here and just paste it, and then see what our keyframes are doing. Delete all these keyframes and grab the keyframes from down here that we need, and then copy those up here. So I think that might do it. Possibly. Let's delete this one. And now let's see what's happening back in our composition layer. So I think that might have just worked. Or no, it didn't. It obviously didn't. I can still see them there. Because here it's looking like it is masked. Okay, I think I'm just going to have to say I don't know what's going on here, and I don't know why that's happening. That is a pity. There must be a way to mask this rotor brush layer. But what is it? What is it? You can see that everything else worked anyway with our shadows, so we're not getting that double shadow effect. The rotor brush layer comes in. We are having a bit of an issue here because we don't have the shadow mask properly in our main main sequence mask. So let's just do that now. Use J to go back to the nearest keyframe. We can drag that down. Use K to go to the next one. Drag this one closer again. So I think that that's going to be better. But we're still obviously getting this rotor brush issue because we can't mask it out. Strangely enough. Why can't we mask rotor brush? Let's see if we can Google it. Hang on. Can't mask rotor brush layer in After Effects. Rotor brush to masks. How can you mask a rotor brush? You can copy rotor brush past properties and paste them into masks, shapes, and instances, just like you can with other kinds of paths. This refers to the fact, how do I mask a layer? How do you fix rotor brush? How do you mask a rotoscope in After Effects? New masks on top of rotor brush. Let's see. Is there a way to apply additional masks on top of a rotor brush layer? The order of operations is masks, then effects. If you apply a mask to a layer, then you're going to mess with the effects that you've applied. Rotor brush is an effect. As you know, the pre-composing works. Do that. But I did try that. I did try pre-composing, did I not? Let's see. So, pre-compose. Move all attributes into the new composition. Maybe I need to do that for that to work. And now if I mask, let's just grab a square for... Okay. Now it's working. Okay, because I didn't... Okay, we got there eventually. So, basically, I didn't, when I pre-composed, I said leave all attributes in the composition we're working in instead of move all attributes into the new composition. So that was a silly mistake. So click OK. Could save us a lot of time there anyway. Hang on, let's just make sure that we see where this comes in. Right there. Let's right click, pre-compose, and move all attributes into the new composition. Now we can trim this, hold down Alt, left square bracket, and now we can go ahead to where this ends, which is like where we don't need the rotor brush anymore. So I think it's like here. Yeah, that's where it ends. You can see it just clicks in right there. So that's where we hold down Alt, right square bracket, and that's where the rotor brush ends. Now we're going to be able to mask this finally. My God, sorry about that, guys. Just strange one, yeah. I didn't know you couldn't mask rotor brushes. Anyway, so let's create our mask now on this. So we're going to put an anchor point here, and one here, and one up here, and one here, and one here. Okay. Finally, we have a mask. Let's just refine this a bit. And let's add a keyframe on the mask path. Let's change the color of this as well, so we can see it, and add a keyframe. Okay, now let's scrub and animate this. And check that, that's fine. Scrub some more. Animate this again. Okay. That is presentable. Okay, so let's now have a look at this and see what it looks like. We're not going to play this slowly, we're just going to scrub through it nice and quick. So that's all good. Control S to save, because if After Effects froze right there now, that would have been the end of it. That's fine, that's all good. Rotor brush comes in to hide our messy shadow issue. It is being masked, rotor brush pops out, and everything is fine. Cool, okay. So the next thing now is the fine detail. So this stuff you can decide, oh, I don't want to do that. I've already sat here and watched myself fumble around with this stuff for God knows how long. So you could say, no, I don't want to do that. I'm happy with this. But most of you probably won't be happy with it because we need to do some, we need to sort out the details here. So first of all, I can see something that needs to be refined here straight away. That's in our main sequence. Mask pass. I'm going to, everything looks fine there. And everything's fine there, so it's in between, we need to refine. So let's do that now. Grab the mask path, grab your selection tool, and let's refine this. Okay, better. Any more refinements needed? Probably here as well. So try and make any refinements that you need, try and make them on the keyframes if possible, so that you're not adding loads of them like I just did there. So just kind of skip between keyframes using J and K. And then do any refinements that you need on the keyframes. Now you might have to refine further in between them, like here. And maybe here. And that's how you go about really, being an absolute perfectionist about that, just refining the hell out of it. But I'm not going to do all that now. I'm just going to say, okay, let's get into the rest of this tutorial, which is these little gaps in the castles. So what we do is do Control S to save, and we say, okay, there's a gap here. Let's actually just focus on a bigger gap for now. So this gap obviously is huge. So we're going to create another mask, grab your pen tool, and let's zoom in. And let's go and create another mask here. So this kind of has some kind of like foliage or some moss growing here. So we need to mask around that. And now let's create, on this new mask, we can create a mask path. We can lock this one so that we're not interfering with it by accident. And we can unravel this and create a mask path. So now if we scrub, we're going to be able to see the spheres through this gap now. We just need to animate all of this again. So you can see how this can take a lot of time to perfect. And I did, as I said, try the rotor brush tool, but it wasn't really working for me. But I am new to the rotor brush tool, so I wonder if I'm just not using it properly. Anyway, that's kind of the gist of this. Okay guys, so I'm going to fast forward the video here and I'll pop back to you once I have all of this done. Okay, so that is that one done. You can see this stuff takes some time, like it does. So if I just kind of watch that part, now we're going to be able to see the spheres through this little gap. And it's just really adding to the realism of this. It's really selling it. You know, and you have to do this gap. You'd have to mask that one. You don't have to, but you should. Obviously this one and this one. And it's going to go, yeah. There are more, guys. There's more. And then you have this one, and then you have, just that one. So you have quite a bit of masking left to do. So do I. That's all ahead of me. But I'm not going to go ahead and force you guys to watch me doing all that stuff because it's pretty repetitive after this. This is the elbow grease stuff. This is the hard work of this whole part. It's not entirely fun either, to be honest. But that is it, guys. That is the end of this tutorial. So happy masking, and I really do hope you guys learned a lot on this, and thanks for sticking around till the end. If you haven't yet subscribed, please consider doing so, and don't forget to smash that like. I'll see you in the next video.